Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We have a special guest, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. His name is Marion, and he is a friend. He's a friend of the Liberty Movement, and he's been involved in writing, and he's involved in spreading a message, which is always very encouraging to me. Mike is a graduate from Chapman University. He is a investment advisor now in California, but he's gotten some writings and articles in the various organizations like Voices of Liberty, and that's a pretty good organization and a place to go. But he's also put things in the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, LouRockwell.com, Future of Freedom Foundation, and all these groups, including anti-war. I would say that gives him pretty good credentials. So, Mike, I'd like to welcome you to the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Mike, I want to start off with asking you a little bit how you came around to the movement, because that's so important for people to understand, and everybody has a neat little story to tell. So why don't you give us a brief history of when you got interested and realized there was a difference with a policy in economics and foreign policy, which is non-interventionism, versus what this country and most of the world has been living with for many, many years.
You know, I was raised in kind of a conservative Christian home, and so not really overly political, but I took an interest in politics, unfortunately, via talk radio and, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and those types of people, and got very much into kind of a celebration of militarism. And thankfully, through you and just being exposed to you on TV and the debates in the presidential campaigns, I was exposed to non-intervention, and I really realized the error of my ways, and really came to really have a deep regret for cheering war like I had done. Really grasping the death and destruction involved. It wasn't real to me until I was exposed to the truth of it through you and others I've read that you've turned me on to.
You have mentioned that you have admiration for Jefferson and his foreign policy, and the early presidents were pretty good. None of them were perfect, but they were pretty good compared to what we've put up with. But we have that option, and actually we can improve on it, but there's also a cost for what we have been doing, especially what we have been doing for these last 20 or 30 years. Tell us a little bit of how you see the cost of war is so damaging. There's so many different ways that a country that gets involved has a lot of cost. This idea that wars get us out of depression obviously is not true. But people don't understand exactly what the ramifications are, especially if we get into a war that is totally useless and unnecessary.
I wrote an article recently, and the way I kind of summarized what I saw the cost of war being was I used the terms blood, treasure, and soul. And I just, clearly there's so much life lost in war. We lose thousands of American soldiers. We've seen the death of countless thousands, hundreds of thousands of innocents all over the world. There's been an enormous economic cost. The price we pay, in raising taxes, and even more so in just the inflation involved with, through the Federal Reserve, as you talk about all the time, and then the opportunity costs involved as well in the treasure aspect, and just the missed opportunity with what capital could be put towards productive uses instead of destructive uses. And then the final one is the soul of America. I think that through war, many Americans have become supportive even of things like torture and the prison camp in Guantanamo Bay, and I think that's just so destructive to really the soul of our society. And yeah, so I see that the cost is enormous. It really is incalculable.
There's one part of our philosophy on foreign policy that's challenged, and if you had watched the debates, as you said you did, how strongly, especially conservative Republicans, feel about this. And this is introducing the notion that possibly our policies have something to do with those who hate us, and that is the principle of blowback. Did you ever have problems endorsing that? Do you fully endorse the idea that some of this stuff, we sort of bring it upon ourselves?
Yes, that's something that it is difficult to discuss with people. Actually, I was in a discussion the other day, just actually yesterday. It seems to usually be turned around to say, oh, well, you're apologizing for the terrorists, or you're saying it's our fault. And we're not saying it's our fault. But it would be reckless to not look at the motivations of the groups that seek to attack Americans. That they specifically say, whether it's ISIS saying, if you conduct airstrikes, we are going to retaliate against Americans. Why would we not listen to that warning and take heed to the caution, and not just think that it's just because they hate us because we're free, and which is I guess we're not too terribly free nowadays, but that's kind of it is a difficult thing to overcome because people have become so accustomed to that line. They hate us because we're free, and because we're just so awesome, they just want to attack us. And I think it really is worth considering their own words regarding their motivations. It doesn't make them justified ever in committing evil acts of violence against innocents. It's not to justify that at all. But it is to say, why are they doing this? And is there something we can look at with what our government does in our name, which draws these attacks towards the American people?
Sometimes truth hurts, and they get annoyed with that, so they don't want to believe it. But there's also another term that they throw at us, and I just wonder how you handle this, because I'm sure they've challenged you, and that is that not only are we just hating America in that argument, but what about when they throw the term out, oh, you're nothing more than an isolationist? Have you had that? Have you had to answer that question?
Yeah, that's of course a very common one. And I do try to make sure they understand the difference between non-intervention and isolation. I want to be friends with people. I want to trade with people. I want to interact. And the other day I was interacting with a guy who was from Syria, and it was actually in an Uber ride. And it was so interesting to have this guy who was from Syria, and our government almost went to war with Syria. Well, I guess now currently, and then a year ago. And it was just so interesting to interact with this guy and really talk about his family and talk about how we could understand each other and relate to each other with our wives and our family and our friends. But then to think that the government is waging wars and intervening in these countries, whereas I want to just be friends with these people and interact and find our common ground. And if we disagree, then we can we can agree to disagree. But we could find common ground through commerce and trade. And I think that mostly we could, get along. It's not to say everything would be perfect, but I certainly don't want to isolate it and, just go into my cave and not have anything to do with the world. I feel like and you said this before, right. I feel like the interventionists are really the isolationists because they want to just tell everyone what to do. And if everyone doesn't agree, then, we'll bomb you or whatever.
And what about the age groups? I'm sure you have come across many in different age groups. Have you found out, like I have, that it seems like the younger generation is probably a little bit more open to these views than those who have been locked into the Republican Party for the last 50 years?
Absolutely. I really think, I think maybe it helps that, if people are in their 20s and early 30s, they have had less time of propagandization and indoctrination from the government, so there's less to overcome. It's maybe more difficult for someone to overcome 40 years of that, though people do. But I think that maybe it's a little bit that they're more open-minded, and people of my age group are more open to seeing. And we also know that we're just getting a bad deal. We can see that the debt is $17.6+ trillion, and we're inheriting that, and so we're realizing that it's a bad deal that we're getting here, and so we're much more open to looking for alternatives.
There's so many things going on in the world, in our own country, with violation of liberties and the militarization of the police, lousy education, so many problems. And then we see this constant agitation for looking for another war to fight. There's a lot of reasons for all of us to say, that's so overwhelming and it's so too depressive and you don't want to deal with it. Yet when we know we have some solutions, do you have these days when some days you're more pessimistic than others, or do you feel pretty upbeat about your willingness to speak out and that we at least have it chance to reverse this someday.
Yeah, it can be a little bit discouraging at times when you see just relentless propaganda in the media, and it just seems like the war drums beat so loud. But then when you look around, you see there's lots of enthusiasm among not just young people, but really lots of different people from different age groups, but especially young people. And then the technology that's available to us that was not available even a couple of years ago, the ability to spread the truth via whether it's Facebook or Twitter or this channel, for example, which was not available even in recent history. So, that capability, allowed through technology is pretty encouraging, and it's a good cause for optimism, I think.
You've written for so many of the libertarian websites, and you're pretty active. Do you have your own website that you have with a libertarian message?
I do. I maintain a blog. It's at iownmyself.com. So, and that it's kind of just aimed at spreading the libertarian ideas and, the principle of, not just the principle of self-ownership, but though that's where the name comes from. I thought it was a nice domain name, iownmyself.com. But, really covering lots of different things. I tend to talk about war often because I feel like that's such a vital issue, and it's so misunderstood by so many well-meaning people who just haven't yet understood why their personal values are perfectly in line with the anti-war cause. And so, but yeah, and then I enjoy writing articles and getting them published at other places that I really respect them and learn a lot from. So yeah, I'm trying to be involved in different areas.
Mike, I want to thank you very much for being on today. We have to close out, but it's always energizing to me to meet people like you, because I see the movement growing, and you've already have reached a lot of people, in your early life. So this is the reason I come down, although I have days when I think these problems are so huge, how are we going to handle them? But individuals like you who put an effort out is very encouraging, not only to me, but to others. So I want to thank you very much for being on, and very much for being part of Voices of Liberty, and please stay active.
Thank you. It really is an honor. Thanks a lot for your time.